Why do we go back to things we already left? Not because they were perfect, but because they were never finished. Picture this: four human beings, a metal capsule, 25,000 miles per hour, through absolute silence, watching the Earth shrink behind them, the moon growing larger ahead. And as they get closer, something unexpected happens. They smile, not with excitement, with recognition. The way you smile at something you always knew you would come back to. On April 6, 2026, Artemis 2 became the first crewed mission to return to the moon since December 1972. 54 years. And the question nobody is asking is not how we got there. It is why, despite the cost, despite the decades, despite everything else demanding our attention, we could never fully leave it alone. The answer to that lies in what I will call the Artemis Paradox. The primal compulsion to go back, to unfinished things, to abandoned places, to people we left without closure. Because that compulsion is not about space, it is about something hardwired into every human brain, and the discovery that what we find when we return is never quite what we left there. That is not just humanity's story, it is yours. Here is what Artemis 2 actually is: not a space mission, a return. Humanity walked on the moon 6 times, left equipment still sitting in the lunar dust, and then stopped, walked away, without closure, without deciding it was finished. For 54 years, the moon just sat there, unchanged, waiting, until we went back. The pull towards something abandoned, left unfinished, held at a distance long enough to become mythology that never stops calling you back. This is the Artemis Paradox encapsulated. You know this feeling. Once you understand the psychology driving it, you will never mistake it for something it is not again. The brain does not file unfinished things away. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Incomplete experiences stay cognitively active, surfacing at unexpected moments, demanding a resolution that never comes. In studies, people remembered interrupted tasks almost twice as well as completed ones. The incompletion itself is what keeps the memory alive. The Artemis Paradox: unfinished business has infinite patience. You have your own version, the conversation that still replays years later, not because it was the worst, but because it was never finished. The relationship with no real ending, just a silence that became permanent before either of you decided it should be. The career left before you were ready. The city left without feeling like you chose to leave. These things don't go quiet. They orbit you for years, sometimes decades. Like the moon, the mind doesn't let go of what was left unfinished. It keeps it running, pulled by a gravity it cannot always name. But here is where it gets complicated. Going back and finding what you left are not the same thing. The danger of return. Artemis 2 is not going back to the same moon. The moon hasn't changed, but the people returning are not the same people who left. And critically, the story humanity has been telling itself about the moon for 54 years is not the moon. It is the myth the absence built. Psychologists call this rosy retrospection. The longer the absence, the more the memory edits itself. Hard edges soften, difficult parts fade. What remains is a version of the past that never quite existed in the form you remember it. You never return to what you left. You return to what you made of it while you were gone. You have done this. The ex you thought about for years, not the actual person, but the curated version. The one your memory quietly improved during every year of silence. You removed the arguments, the incompatibility, the specific ways they hurt you. Then you went back. And the first conversation felt slightly wrong. Not bad, just different from the version you had been holding. The moon does not change, but the story you tell about the moon changes with every year you stay away. The Artemis Paradox. The danger is not the going back. It is mistaking the myth for the memory. So what is building that myth in the silence? It is late. You are on YouTube, you click on a song you have not heard in 20 years, and something happens that has nothing to do with the song itself. You are not taken back to a specific memory. You are taken back to a feeling, a simpler time, less pressure, a version of your life before it got this complicated. That is nostalgia, and the moon represents the same thing to an entire species. 1969 was not simpler, but it feels that way from 54 years away. Psychologist Konstantin Sedekidis found that nostalgia is not passive fondness. It is a motivated cognitive process. The brain actively reconstructing the past to feel more coherent and more meaningful than the present currently does. Crucially, nostalgia spikes during periods of uncertainty and stress. It is the brain's stabilizing mechanism. When now feels unstable, the mind reaches for a past that felt solid and begins to polish it. Every year of absence is another year of polishing. 54 years produces not a memory, but a monument. Which is why the Artemis launch was watched by hundreds of millions, more than any space mission in decades. The International Space Station has been continuously inhabited for over 25 years. Nobody watches it like this, because the ISS never left. Distance doesn't kill desire. It transforms what you are desiring into something that feels more significant than the original ever was. The Artemis Paradox. Absence didn't preserve the moon, nostalgia rebuilt it, and it does the same to every person, place, and chapter you have ever left behind. But here is the part that changes everything. The return that transforms. Not every return is a trap. Commander Reed Wiseman said something during the mission that stopped people. That from lunar distance, looking back at Earth, everything seemed smaller, more manageable. The things that divide us barely visible from out there. Christina Koch, asked to describe the mission in one word, said, humility. They did not find what was left in 1972. They found something only distance could reveal. Psychologists call this self-distancing, the cognitive shift that occurs when we view our own situation from a removed vantage point. Research by Ethan Cross at the University of Michigan found that self-distancing reduces emotional reactivity, improves decision-making, and produces clearer insight than being fully immersed in an experience ever can. The leaving created the distance. The distance created the clarity. This is nostalgia used correctly, not to recover what was, but to understand what the present was too close to show you. The friend you reconnected with after years who reflected back something about yourself you could not have seen at the time. The version of yourself you set aside that looked at clearly from here was not failure, was foundation. The Artemis Paradox at its best, going back not to retrieve what was left but to see what only the distance made visible. The realization and final button. In 1972, Gene Cernan stepped off the moon and said, "We shall return." It took humanity 54 years. The pull of the unfinished never faded. Nostalgia rebuilt what the memory left behind into something more compelling than the reality that was there. That is the Artemis Paradox. Not just humanity's story, yours, but here's where it gets complicated. Going back is not always the answer. Psychology is divided on this. On one side, the Zeigarnik research, the self-distancing studies, the evidence that unresolved loops carry a real cognitive and emotional cost that return can resolve. On the other, psychologist Timothy Wilson found that we are surprisingly poor at predicting how revisiting the past will actually feel. We overestimate the relief, we underestimate the disruption. What felt like unfinished business turns out, on return, to have been finished all along, just not in the way we wanted it to be. Sometimes the open loop is not a call to action. It is just the sound of something that did not work out. Only you know which category yours falls into. But whatever you decide, go with your eyes open. Nostalgia is a persuasive narrator. It has had years to craft its argument. It will make the return sound necessary, the timing feel right, the risk feel manageable. It is not lying to you. It is just telling you the story it has been perfecting in your absence. So before you go back to the person, the place, the chapter that never got its ending, make sure you are returning to the reality, not the monument the silence built, because some open loops close better from exactly where you are standing. The Artemis Paradox. Sometimes the bravest thing is not the return. It is the decision to let the distance be enough.